Black entrepreneur faces rude talk show host. His reaction earned him admiration across America. Welcome back to Meaningful Stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and start the story right now. The studio lights blazed like 1,000 suns, their searing glare cutting through the haze of anticipation that hung over the morning spotlight set. Marcus Jefferson stepped into the inferno, his crisp suit a shield against the chaos he sensed brewing beneath the surface. This wasn't just another routine appearance, another chance to tout his tech empire. No. Tonight the air crackled with something feral, something alive. The stakes towered higher than ever. The audience a sea of eyes glinting with hunger, curiosity, and a whisper of doubt. This wasn't about business anymore, it was personal. A crucible that would test the steel of his soul. Marcus adjusted his tie, the fabric cool against his skin, and sank into the plush chair across from Rick Davidson, the ringmaster of this circus. A man whose smile masked a predator's intent. The crowd roared as Rick's voice sliced through the din, smooth as velvet but edged with a hollow chill. We're joined today by Marcus Jefferson, a man who's clawed his way to incredible success against all odds. His grin stretched wide, too polished, too perfect, a rehearsed mask that didn't reach his eyes. Applause thundered, but Marcus felt the weight of their stares, some admiring, some skeptical, all dissecting him like a specimen under glass. He returned a smile, steady and sharp, a flicker of defiance in the storm. Rick leaned forward, his posture a coiled spring, his gaze piercing as if he could unravel Marcus with a single glance. The host had invited him to talk about his startup, a juggernaut that had soared from nothing to millions in under 2 years. Toppling giants and rewriting the rules. But Marcus knew better than to trust the surface calm. Something sinister lurked in Rick's rehearsed enthusiasm. Marcus was no stranger to the spotlight. From a small-town dreamer with nothing but grit, he'd forged an empire, shattering barriers that loomed like iron walls for men like him. Black, bold, and unapologetic, his rise was a wildfire, undeniable and fierce, a beacon for those who dared to dream beyond their chains. Yet as he sat there, the studio's heat pressing against his skin, a shiver of unease snaked down his spine. Rick's introduction wasn't praise, it was a trap. A velvet glove hiding a clenched fist. From a place where opportunities barely flicker, Rick began, his voice a blade dipped in honey. To the top of an industry ruled by deep pockets and old blood, how'd you do it? Marcus? Luck? Or something else? The question landed like a spark on dry tinder. Its implication clear. Marcus's triumph couldn't be his own. It had to be a fluke. A gift. A cheat. The air thickened. The crowd's murmurs a low growl in the distance. Marcus took a breath, feeling the familiar knot tighten, not fear, but the ember of a fight he'd waged 100 times before. Rick's tone wasn't just a question, it was a gauntlet. A dare to prove he belonged. The lights burned hotter. The cameras zeroed in, and Marcus steadied himself, his hands resting firm in his lap. This wasn't a talk show anymore, it was a battlefield. And he'd walked in unarmed but unbroken. Whatever Rick had planned, Marcus wasn't here to play the grateful guest. He was here to claim his ground. And the world was watching, waiting for the first blow to fall. The studio pulsed with a restless energy. The lights overhead blazing like a judge's gavel poised to strike. Marcus Jefferson sat tall in his chair, his crisp suit a silent armor against the storm brewing across from him. Rick Davidson leaned in, his smile a razor-thin veneer stretched over something darker, his eyes glinting with the predatory gleam of a man who thrived on tearing others down. The audience held its breath, a faceless jury caught in the crosshairs of a duel they didn't yet understand. Rick's voice slithered through the silence, smooth as oil but sharp as broken glass. So, Marcus, he began, his tone a taunt wrapped in curiosity. You're from some nowhere town. A speck on the map where dreams go to die. How does someone like you climb to the top of an industry drowning in big money and bigger names? Luck, or something else? The words landed like a sucker punch, cloaked in innocence but dripping with venom. Luck, something else. The implication burned, a sly jab that Marcus's rise couldn't be his own. That a black man from nothing couldn't conquer giants without a hidden hand pulling strings. The crowd murmured, a low rumble of unease, as Marcus felt the familiar sting claw at his gut. He'd faced this before, the sideways glances, the whispered doubts, But tonight it cut deeper. Sharper. Rick's rehearsed charm, a blade aimed at his core. He drew a breath, steadying the ember of defiance flickering within, and met the host's gaze head-on. "Well, Rick," he said, his voice a calm tide rolling over jagged rocks. "It wasn't luck. It was blood, sweat, and guts. Taking risks when everyone else cowered. I saw a crack in the wall and tore it wide open. No matter how many said it couldn't be done." His words rang with the weight of truth. A testament forged in sleepless nights and relentless drive. The audience stirred, some nodding, others leaning closer, but Rick's nod was a mockery, his lips curling into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Hard work, huh?" he drawled, his tone thick with condescension. "Sure, that's part of it, but let's not kid ourselves. Marcus, not everyone who grinds makes it to your perch. You had an edge, right? A mentor? A hookup? Maybe a little inside scoop?" The accusation hung heavy, a noose tightening around Marcus's legacy, suggesting his triumph was borrowed, tainted, unworthy of the man who'd built it. The air crackled, the studio lights flaring hotter as if feeding off the tension. Marcus's jaw tightened, the subtle jab slicing through years of battles fought and won. Rick wasn't just questioning his journey, he was dismantling it, brick by brick, for a nation to see. Then came the killing blow. Rick leaned closer, his smile a twisted mask. "I mean, let's be real here. You're a black man in a game that's, well, not exactly your color. How do you explain that?" The question detonated, a thunderclap disguised as curiosity, its edges razor sharp with intent. The crowd gasped, the sound swallowed by the thickening silence. Every eye locked on Marcus as the weight of Rick's words sank in, not a query, but a challenge, a dare to justify his very existence. Marcus felt it like a fist to the chest. The old wound ripped open, years of being the outsider, the anomaly, the one who had to prove he belonged. The studio seemed to shrink, the lights searing his skin, the air heavy with judgment. But he didn't flinch, his hands stayed steady, his pulse a war drum in his ears. He'd fought too hard, climbed too far, to let this smug gatekeeper unravel him. The gauntlet was down, and Marcus wasn't about to bow. This wasn't just an interview anymore, it was war. And the world was watching, waiting for him to strike back. The morning spotlight studio crackled with a live wire tension, the air thick as if a storm had rolled in and refused to break. Rick Davidson sat smug in his throne, his smirk a jagged edge gleaming under the studio lights, his eyes boring into Marcus Jefferson like a hunter sizing up his kill. The crowd teetered on the edge of their seats, a restless sea of whispers and held breaths, sensing blood in the water. Rick had struck his blow, dismissing Marcus's rise as a fluke, a tale too good to be true, and now he pressed the attack, his voice a velvet dagger slicing deeper. "Sure, Marcus," he sneered, leaning back with mock ease, arms folded like a king dismissing a peasant. "Your story sells, rags to riches. The underdog who made it. People eat that up, press, interviews, documentaries. But let's cut the act. Your journey's not as special as you think." "Is it?" The words detonated, a venomous blast that turned Marcus's triumph into a cheap gimmick, a circus act for the masses. The audience shifted, murmurs rippling like cracks in ice, some uneasy, others spellbound by the host's audacity. The lights burned hotter, a relentless glare searing Marcus's skin. But it was Rick's gaze, cold, calculating, stripping him bare, that ignited the fire in his chest. This wasn't about his startup, his innovation, it was about Rick reducing him to a stereotype. A black man whose success could only be a prop, never a pillar. Marcus's hands clenched in his lap, the ember of rage flaring into a blaze. But he held it tight, channeling it into steel. He wouldn't break, not here, not now. Rick pressed on, oblivious to the storm he'd unleashed, his tone dripping with false camaraderie. "What's next for you, huh? You've got the momentum, but how long can you keep it up? This game's brutal, everyone's waiting for the fall." The question was a taunt, a dare to prove he wasn't a fluke. But beneath it lurked the unspoken, "You don't belong." Marcus's jaw tightened, his pulse a war drum thundering in his ears. He'd answered these barbs before. But tonight was different. Rick wasn't just probing, he was dismantling. Piece by piece, a legacy forged in blood and grit. The cameras zoomed in, the crew's eyes glinted with anticipation. The world beyond the glass holding its breath for the crack. Then Rick went for the kill. "Look, Marcus," he said, his voice rising with a smug authority that echoed through the studio. "You're up against a system never built for people like you. Odds stacked high from day one. So tell me, how much of this is you? And how much is just the system propping you up?" The words crashed like a guillotine, sharp and final, slicing through years of struggle to paint Marcus as a puppet, his merit a mirage. The crowd gasped, a collective jolt, as the accusation hung there, naked, ugly, daring him to crumble. The air turned electric, the silence a suffocating weight. Every lens trained on Marcus's face as the trap snapped shut. But Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes blazed, a quiet inferno breaking free. And he leaned forward, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade through flesh. "You're wrong, Rick. You've got it all twisted." He turned to the camera, his words a thunderclap aimed not just at the host but at the millions watching. A nation poised on the edge. "You want to pin this on the system? On race? That's your game, not mine. My success isn't some handout, it's drive. It's passion. It's falling and clawing back up when no one else would. You don't get it because you can't see past your own walls." Rick's smirk faltered, his mask slipping as Marcus's voice rose. Steady but molten. "Privilege? You mean the privilege of being doubted every damn step? Of proving I belong in rooms you take for granted? That's the fight, Rick, not what's given. But what I took despite you and your system." The studio trembled, Marcus's words a seismic wave crashing over Rick's throne, shattering his smug reign. The crowd erupted, a roar of shock and awe. As the host recoiled, his control unraveling. This wasn't a defense, it was a declaration of war. A reckoning that tore through the airwaves and set the world ablaze. Marcus wasn't just standing his ground, he was claiming it. And nothing would silence him now. The morning spotlight studio quaked in the aftermath of Marcus Jefferson's words. The air thick with the smoke of a battle won. His voice still echoed, a thunderous roar that had ripped through Rick Davidson's smug fortress, leaving it in ruins. The host sat frozen, his throne a crumbling relic, his once sharp smirk replaced by a brittle, twitching mask of disbelief. The lights pulsed overhead, their harsh glare casting jagged shadows across his face, exposing the cracks in his composure. The crowd teetered on the brink, a restless tide of gasps and murmurs swelling into a storm, their eyes darting between Marcus's unyielding fire and Rick's faltering reign. The cameras bore down, relentless witnesses to a reckoning that had just rewritten the rules. Rick's throat bobbed, a desperate gulp as he clawed for control, his voice emerging strained and hollow. "Well, Marcus," he croaked, forcing a smile that shattered like glass. "That's certainly a perspective." The words stumbled out, a feeble shield against the tidal wave Marcus had unleashed. But they rang empty, stripped of the authority he'd wielded moments ago. He shifted in his seat, his hands fumbling, a king dethroned by a man he dared to underestimate. Marcus leaned back, arms crossed, his gaze a steel blade that pinned Rick in place, calm, commanding, unbreakable. The audience felt it, the crew sensed it. Power had shifted, and it wasn't coming back. Beyond the studio's walls, the world ignited. Marcus's words tore through the airwaves like wildfire. Clips of the clash exploding across screens and feeds with a ferocity that shook the digital earth. Twitter erupted. Hashtags. Hashtag respect Marcus. Hashtag own your story, blazing into trends as thousands, then millions, seized the moment. Voices long silenced roared to life, sharing tales of struggle and triumph, their stories weaving a tapestry of defiance inspired by Marcus's stand. The internet trembled under the weight of it all, a seismic ripple that turned a talk show spat into a movement no one could contain. His company's website buckled under a flood of traffic, orders surging, investors scrambling to align with the man who'd turned a microphone into a megaphone for the overlooked. Back in the studio, the air grew heavy, the silence a living thing pressing down on Rick's shoulders. He cleared his throat again, a futile grasp at dignity. But the damage was carved in stone. "Let's, move on," he muttered, his voice a ghost of its former swagger. But the crowd's energy had shifted, riveted to Marcus. Their cheers a low rumble of awe. The host's empire was fracturing, his subtle biases laid bare for all to see. A wound that wouldn't heal. Outside, the backlash brewed. Advertisers flinched. Networks buzzed, and the morning spotlight's ratings spiked, not from Rick's triumph, but from Marcus's wildfire truth. Articles dissected the clash, forums raged, and the nation split, some hailing Marcus as a titan, others clutching at Rick's tattered banner. But one thing was undeniable. The system he'd mocked had just been rattled to its core. Marcus sat steady, a rock amid the chaos, his fire now a quiet ember burning deep. This wasn't just his victory, it was a spark flung into the dark, igniting every corner where doubt had festered. Rick's reputation bled out on live TV, his patronizing jabs exposed as the frail weapons of a man outmatched. The studio lights flickered, as if straining to hold the weight of the moment, while beyond the glass, a nation leaned in, electrified by the man who'd turned a trap into a trumpet. The fallout was only beginning, and Marcus Jefferson stood at its heart, unshaken, unstoppable, a force the world could no longer ignore. The dust of the morning spotlight showdown settled like ash over a battlefield. But the air still thrummed with the aftershocks of Marcus Jefferson's stand. The studio lights had dimmed, the cameras stilled, yet the echoes of his words roared on, a wildfire tearing through the world beyond the glass. Marcus emerged from the clash not just a man, but a titan, a force who'd cracked the earth beneath a system too long unchallenged. The nation watched, breathless, as his defiance ignited a revolution, its flames leaping from screens to streets, from boardrooms to backyards. This wasn't the end, it was the dawn of something seismic, something unstoppable. In the days that followed, Marcus seized the storm he'd unleashed, wielding it like a blade forged in the heat of battle. His tech empire swelled, a juggernaut fueled by a surge of orders and a flood of investors clamoring to back the man who'd turned a talk show into a trumpet blast. But it was more than profit. His phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from media titans, conference halls, and strangers whose voices trembled with gratitude. He stood on stages, his presence a thunderhead, his words a clarion call for those trampled by doubt and dismissal. Marcus Jefferson wasn't just building a company anymore, he was raising a banner. A beacon for every dreamer told their wings were clipped. Every soul told their place was beneath the table. The world bent to listen. And he spoke not of success, but of survival, of shattering ceilings with bare hands. Beyond his rise, the fallout carved a jagged scar across the landscape. Morning spotlight reeled, its polished facade splintering under a deluge of backlash. Advertisers fled like rats from a sinking ship, their brands scorched by the heat of Rick Davidson's exposed prejudice. The producers scrambled, their frantic edits and forced pivots a desperate bid to salvage a show now synonymous with shame. Rick himself stumbled through the wreckage, his once slick charm a tattered rag, his every word dissected by a public that saw through his hollow mask. Clips of his patronizing jabs replayed endlessly, a noose tightening around his career as viewers turned away, their trust shattered. The studio lights that once crowned him king now cast him in shadow. A fallen monarch humbled by the man he dared to belittle. But the true victory pulsed deeper. Beyond the headlines and hashtags, Marcus's voice rippled through living rooms and classrooms. A seismic wave that shook loose the chains of silence. Across the nation, people stood taller, black entrepreneurs who'd faced the same sneers, workers who'd toiled unseen, dreamers who'd been told their stars were too dim. His words became a war cry: you belong, you build, you rise. Social media blazed with their stories, a chorus of resilience that drowned out the old narratives of limitation. His startup morphed into a symbol, a lighthouse piercing the fog of inequity, proving that success wasn't a gift bestowed, it was a fortress stormed, a right claimed with blood and fire. One night, Marcus stood alone on a rooftop, the city sprawling beneath him like a galaxy remade. The horizon burned with the last embers of dusk, a mirror to the blaze he'd sparked. His fight had changed him, once a man proving his worth, now a leader rewriting the rules. The phone calls still poured in, the invitations mounted, but he knew this was bigger than fame. It was a legacy carved in defiance, a testament to every soul who dared to stand when the world knelt. Rick's shadow faded, a footnote in a story Marcus now owned. But the real triumph was the ground trembling beneath, a system rattled, a future reclaimed. The world had listened, and Marcus Jefferson vowed it would never forget. True power wasn't granted, it was taken. And he'd just begun to wield it. Thank you for accompanying us in today's story. See you again in the next videos. Hello and see you again.